everyone, welcome to another episode of Real Estate Tax Tips. My name is Cherry Chen, a chartered professional accountant located in Offshore, Ontario, Canada. And I'm on a mission to become the Google map for hardworking Canadians seeking financial freedom. Well, as we all know, the election is coming up, and actually many of you guys would have done your advance voting. Official election day is April 28th, the coming Monday. I just feel very obligated because the government is always the most invisible investment partner, or not just investment, actually anything in life. The government is actually a partner in our life, whether you believe it or not, because when you work, you gotta pay tax. When you buy groceries, maybe groceries is not too bad, but when you buy anything, any services, go to restaurants, buy alcohol, everything, there is sales tax. And if you live in a home that you own, you have to pay property tax. When you buy a new home, you also need to pay GST and HST on the new homes that you're buying. So this is the reason why we're doing this series, and we have done 2 episodes on the proposed tax policies the 2 major parties are proposing, and I'm just trying to give you some simplified version to compare them side by side. Now, but before I get started, if you find our video useful, make sure you give us a thumbs up. If you don't like what I'm saying, please do not kill me. I mean, this is a financial planning type of YouTube video, has nothing to do with the political view. I see it from my lens, and I would choose whoever that's giving me most tax cut almost all the time, because then I'm an accountant. But if you're someone who prioritizes something else and that means more important to you, by all means, all I'm asking is that everyone should vote on April 28th. Now with that, let's get started. Now, in the previous 2 episodes, I've already touched upon many different types of tax cuts and tax policies that are proposed by the 2 political parties. Now, I'm going to cover what hasn't been covered in the previous 2 episodes. Now, if you haven't got a chance to watch the 2 episodes, make sure that you watch those 2 episodes. Now, beginning with the Conservative government, what I'm seeing is that they are actually proposing something I'm really also very excited about. And I hated this policy when it was introduced. This policy is called Underused Housing Tax Act. And basically, it's a part of the act that requires non-resident owners to report to the government, could certify that they have their houses rented. Otherwise, they get charged 1% of vacancy tax, essentially. That's what that whole thing is. And it wasn't introduced properly, so many of the real estate investors in Canada, they are Canadians, and they are not meant to be required to file the form information return. They were asked to do that, and a lot of them still hasn't filed. So this is a really bad policy, and it really affects the very small amount of housing supply out there. Unfortunately, it caused a huge chaos in the Canadian economy, useless policy, in my opinion. But the Conservative government, they said that if they are elected, they will prioritize repealing this whole thing altogether. And of course, Liberal Party doesn't have that altogether. The second thing that's related to housing that I ain't really sure about is that the reporting of the sale of your primary residence. Currently, actually it was introduced in 2016. I do believe that it was introduced by the Liberal government. Essentially, we are required to report on our tax return that when you dispose your primary residence, you are required to report it on the tax return. If you don't report it, there is a penalty. The Conservative government is saying that they are considering essentially eliminating that requirement. I personally think that it's not really a priority, and it's actually better that better for CRA, easier for them to find people who are using that primary residence exemption by having this reported. So to me, this is not necessary, even though I generally support elimination of further reporting requirement. But for this particular one, I question the necessity for doing so. The Conservative also proposed that the caregiver tax credit to be fully refundable. Essentially, if you have someone that you have to take care of and that person meets certain criteria, you would be able to get a tax credit to offset against your income. And previously, this tax credit is a non-refundable amount, and they're proposing to convert that to a tax credit that it could be refundable. So for someone who's not working altogether, altogether not earning any income, that person could, being the caregiver person, they would be eligible to get some money back from the government. It's a small amount, but at the same time, any tax refund is always welcome. Another one that is worthwhile mentioning is that they're going to streamline the entire disability tax credit application. Also very welcome, because currently there is a specific government form that is required to be filed and filled out by the doctor, and the taxpayer file it, and then it gets approved by the CRA, and then you would be able to go back to get your disability tax credit or transfer that to the person that's taking care of the disabled person. So if there is any way to simplify the tax system, it's always more welcome. The Conservative is also proposing to reform the investment tax credit for manufacturing and production, for the Canadian manufacturing and production. So there is not a lot of information out there right now. And again, all these policies are being proposed at the moment. We don't know who's going to be elected. So we don't really have a lot of information to comment on this particular tax policy. Now, on the flip side, Liberal also has its own policies that don't have anything that I could compare with from the Conservative side, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. Now, this is in addition to what we discussed in the episode 1 and episode 2. Now, this is the final episode, so this is in addition to what we've already talked about. Now, the Liberal would like to introduce something called Healthcare Workers Hero Tax Credit. And essentially, they want to introduce this new refundable tax credit, essentially, for healthcare workers, and they will get some money back. But this is not taking away from the additional funding. According to them, they are going to stop the previously announced funding, and they're going to use that funding for this tax credit. So I don't know what that really means, but if healthcare workers are able to get some refundable tax credit, maybe it's useful. And then they are also proposing to expand the mineral tax credit and also expand the Canadian exploration expense. So essentially, they're going to allow a bigger tax deduction for anyone who engage in the exploration expense, and also giving a bigger credit. Now that we've covered basically all the tax policies that I can capture, just wanted to run it quickly, the summary of all the policies, and then you can decide. I'm going to talk about the bill, the actual dollar bill to foot all these policies. Now, with that, I'm going to start with the Conservative policy. The first one is that the Conservative government is going to reduce the income tax rate, the bottom personal tax exemption tax rate from 15% to 12.75% for any income that's above the personal tax exemption all the way up to $57,000 income. That marginal tax rate is going to be reduced. That's number one. They're also going to increase that personal tax exemption amount for seniors to $37,000. They're going to give the seniors some tax saving of about $2,700. The Liberals also was the one, if you don't remember, they're also the one who started this filibuster and forced the election. They were the one who decided to stall the legislative to cause this election and repeal the entire, essentially, capital gain inclusion rate. They were the one who's going against it nonstop, so that we are where we are today. They also proposed a capital gains deferral thing, which I'm super, super excited about. Essentially, if you sell something and realize a capital gain in Canada and you are using the proceeds to reinvest in Canadian infrastructure, Canadian businesses, Canadian stock market, or whatever that's Canadian that they haven't yet to fully define at the moment because they're not in the government yet, they're not in power yet, is something that everyone is so excited about. We have articles from Jackman's, who's an economist, saying that it could be unlocking $12.5 billion of capital being reinvested in Canada. So it's something that is worthwhile getting excited about. He also, Pierre Poilievre, also announced that the TFSA, there's a TFSA pop-up investment contribution room Essentially, you're going to get an additional $5,000 investment limit if you are reinvesting that $5,000 additional contribution limit into the Canadian market. GST on new home, the Conservative government said that they will allow everyone who purchase a new home for if they are under 1.3 million and not pay GST on that amount. So that's amazing. Carbon tax that we all hated, the Conservative government is proposed, the Conservative Party, not Conservative government, the Conservative Party is proposing to repeal the entire carbon tax altogether. And then they are also going to temporarily propose to remove the GST on cars that are made in Canada for a certain period of time because of tariff. They also promise to essentially set up a tax reform task to simplify the Income Tax Act. Every time they talk about simplify the Income Tax Act, it's always music to my ears. They are also going to expand the deductions for trade workers. They are also going to eliminate the automatic alcohol excise tax increase on an annual basis, and they are going to roll back that tax back to the 2017 level. They are going to also restrict corporate aircraft deduction, essentially reduce the amount that these big corporations using private jet to reasonable amount as if you were to take essentially commercial flight. They also promise to close offshore tax loophole to recoup some money. They're also going to offer some flexibility for seniors to convert the RSP to RRIF at a later age. Instead of 72, they are proposing to delay it for 2 years. Now that is the comprehensive list that I have for Conservative Party. Now let's talk a little bit about the Liberal Party as well, so that we come up with the total comprehensive analysis. So the first thing first is that the Liberal is also going to reduce the bottom tax bracket tax rate from 15% to 14%. Conservative proposed to do it from 15% to 12.75%. Liberal is to 14%. Capital gain inclusion rate, Liberal was the one who introduced it, and now they canned it. So that was really the beginning of this whole thing, because they introduced the capital gain inclusion rate. Everyone wanted to leave Canada, and that's where we are right now. So they did, Mark Carney did essentially cancel the whole policy. At the beginning, I think in March, he publicly announced that it's an ill-timed policy. And there is no capital gain deferral like the Conservative Party, so Liberal has no capital gain deferral at all. There's no TFSA pop-up for Liberal. However, the Liberal Party is proposing to bring back something called the multi-unit residential building tax incentive. Essentially, if investors are investing in the qualified multi-unit residential building, then you would, a taxpayer who invests in these investment vehicles, they would be able to write off the expense on the building, and they could use that expense, essentially sort of like a paper loss, to offset against their income, and hence become leveraging that to become a tax shelter. And they would be able to lower their personal income tax to stimulate the economy and stimulate the private sector to create more housing. And that's what they're proposing. And this is an old policy that was back in the days before I started, maybe before even I was born, I think. And they're bringing it back to essentially encourage more housing. Creation of more housing. Now, in terms of GST on new purchase home, the Liberal Party is proposing to eliminate GST on new home on the $1 million, up to $1 million. But the only way that you would be able to qualify to claim this tax GST exemption is if you are the first-time home buyer. So it's not available for everyone, only available for first-time home buyer. Now, carbon tax, the Liberal government was the one who introduced the carbon tax, as we all know. And they also spent lots of money administering this, and then also spent lots of money rebating the money to us. And now they basically temporarily paused all the personal consumer carbon tax, but they are thinking of expanding the industrial carbon tax. Essentially, for businesses, we will all get charged more carbon tax. That's their plan. Now, they did have a bunch of housing tax measures that I think it's worthwhile mentioning, which I mentioned in the past before. They are proposing to build 500,000 more homes per year, up from 250 in the past, I think. They are proposing to give $25 billion to low-interest debt and equity for Canadian modular home builders. They're also talking about $10 billion low-cost capital in the form of $4 billion fixed rate and $6 billion rapid bill fund for affordable and supportive housing. They're also saying that they will cut the development charge, 50% cut for 5 years on multi-unit project. I think there is something similar in the conservative side as well. They are also allowing a tax relief if you're converting existing structure to nonprofit and land trust. Essentially, you sell them to a nonprofit. This is relatively minor for a capitalist country like us. I don't think there are a lot of opportunities to sell your multi-unit family unit to a nonprofit unless they're buying it at fair market value. Now then that comes back to who's going to fund that particular purchase. And then the Liberal is also proposing to reduce the red tape through unified approval, pre-approved designs, and fast-track proven builders, simplify the codes to encourage more housing building. And the Liberal is also expanding the labor mobility tax deduction for the trade workers as well. So this is a little bit of a copy. They're both doing the same thing essentially. Now we talk about all these. How much does it cost to do all these under each platform? As it turns out, the Conservative Party, they are anticipated. They release the cost for 4 years. Essentially, you add them all up for the next 4 years. They are looking into having a $100 billion deficit over the next 4 years. And when you are like, just like me, because running a deficit for $100 billion over the next 4 years is somewhat mind-boggling. The Liberal Party is looking at $250 billion spending next 4 years. So I don't believe in overspending. I believe in spending within your means. Like deficit sucks, and deficit means that someone has to fund that deficit. And who's going to fund the deficit? Currently, we're borrowing. When we as a person borrow from the bank and we have to do the repayment of debt as a country, when you borrow, you're essentially borrowing against your future generation, because the future generation are the one that's going to pay the next generation of tax, and that tax amount would then be used to fund essentially the interest payment of the debt that we're incurring today. So with that, make sure that you take a vote on April 28th, whichever party that you're supporting. I hope that you find this video useful. Again, if you want more detailed analysis, make sure you visit video 1 and video 2. Until next time, happy Canadian real estate investing.